Welcome. My name is Dr. Nancy Wong Yuen. I am the chair and associate professor of sociology here at Biola University. This is the SCORR conference. This is Hollywood's Double Bind. We're going to be talking about how Latinx and Asian American actors face these kind of very strict boundaries in terms of race and expressions of race and performance. And we're going to, at the end, we're going to talk about how that impacts us in everyday life, and how those kind of limitations are also existent in society, right? But I think that Hollywood perpetuates that when you're not seeing anybody outside of these kind of extremes. So this is research that's based on actually my research since the year 2000. I don't know if were you guys born in 2000? Okay, so eventually I'm gonna say this, and people are like, "We were born before you started this book." But I started this research in 2000 when I started graduate school, and I was interested. So I was actually an English humanities major, creative writing, and then I decided, after just taking Intro to Soc, I decided to jump into a PhD program in sociology. No one had ever gotten a PhD in my family, so I just thought, you could do anything, you know? I didn't really know what it entailed. It was really tough that first year. I didn't really know much. So, but I was interested in Hollywood. I knew I was interested in Hollywood. I was interested in representation and discourse in terms of, if we think of film and television as a sort of text, right? And so I was really interested in studying racism as well, and inequality. So my first research class, I kind of just contacted a theater group, an Asian American theater group. Someone had gone to my high school who I saw on the website was in it. So I said, hey, we're from the same high school. Can I just come hang out? And so I started hanging out there and taking notes. And from there on, I started doing interviews. And I interviewed for my dissertation, which is what you need to complete to get a PhD. I ended up interviewing almost 100 working actors. So what I mean by working actors are actors that essentially populate the screens, right? You guys, we're obsessed with celebrities, but celebrities make up a very small portion of the population. So if you think about majority of the actors that you see on screen, you probably don't know their names, but they're working. They call themselves middle-class actors or journeyman actors, working actors. So I interviewed those because I thought that, these are the people that are not going to have, they have to audition constantly, right? They're not going to get their choices of roles. So then those actors are probably more subject to stereotyping, right? Because those kind of, the roles where you just kind of walk on and walk off, or you just, you're just playing the criminal in all those criminal shows. And so I thought, okay, this is the population to target when I want to know about stereotypes. But so after I finished my project and I started writing the book, I also looked at published interviews. And what I realized, what was interesting was that out of the published interviews with actors of color, I noticed that the celebrities were also saying things that are very similar to the working actors. And then it kind of clicked. I thought, oh my gosh, so even the celebrities of color, they can go very, very quickly from A level to like C level, right? So like, you guys know Steven Yuen from The Walking Dead? So have you guys seen him in anything else since The Walking Dead, since they, sorry, spoiler. I stopped watching and I was just like, I can't believe they killed him off. Anyway, so they killed him off, and he was actually a fan favorite, the big fan favorite. Actually, if you are at all on Twitter, I'm on Twitter, and there was hashtags. There was like funerals. People were giving him virtual funerals because they were so attached. And I read an article where he was auditioning for a 5-line role, like post Walking Dead. Like, he should have been immediately kind of put into some superhero movie. I mean, wouldn't that be perfect? He was kind of a superhero on Walking Dead. He should be in a Marvel film. But Hollywood is not able to conceptualize an Asian male as an action star as of yet, right? Even though if you think about Rogue One, you guys seen Rogue One, Star Wars, yes? So very, very diverse cast. And there were actually 3 Asians in the Resistance, or Rogue One, right? If you guys caught that. So it's possible, but poor Steven Yeun, I'm like still mad about him. So, because I think that if he were a white male actor, he probably would have been, propelled into some sort of amazing Hollywood film career after his run on television. Okay, so you guys know about Oscar So White? Okay, so 2016 and the year before, 2015, there were, out of all the acting nominees, not a single actor of color was nominated. So, and an attorney activist named April Raines came up with the hashtag Oscar So White, and that kind of went viral last year. It took on more kind of a political activism when it was the second year that it happened. Spike Lee posted on Facebook, like, I'm not going to the Oscars. So he actually got an honorary Oscar that year in November, but he decided to take a stance and say, this is ridiculous. You know, you're telling me there's no talented actors of color, that's just ridiculous. So he posted it on Facebook and said, I'm not attending this year. And so the Academy actually responded and started to implement some changes in terms of recruiting because, well, we're going to watch this video from the LA Times, and it'll tell you a little bit about what's going on. Okay, so that was last year. And this year, it's better. Better. So actors in a leading role, we have Denzel Washington, Ruth Negga, actress in a leading role. Actor in a supporting role, we have Mahershala Ali and Dev Patel. And then an actress in a supporting role, there are actually a majority of Black actresses, Viola Davis, Naomi Harris, and Octavia Spencer. So, you know, I mean, people might think, oh, yay, Oscar So White's over, you know. We don't know who's going to win yet. We haven't seen that. And I also wrote an article about La La Land. I know that's maybe sacred for some of you guys, but if you dig deeper into La La Land and kind of what it means to be like a movie about jazz, but then the main actor is white, and then and then the Black actor, you know, John Legend, is actually seen as the sellout. I mean, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar just came out with an article about kind of saying that this is, maybe it's an ironic twist, but it certainly doesn't make African Americans look very good, right? So anyway, so I have this, I'm like, I hope, because, you know, La La Land got 14 nominations, record, it's the top nomination that's ever gotten of any movie. It's tied with Titanic and All About Eve for the top nominations, so. Yeah, anyway, we could talk about La La Land. You guys can ask me questions about it, but I have lots of opinions about that. But did you also notice, out of all the nominees of color, only one nominee was non-Black, right? And that's Dev Patel, and he is Indian British, so he's not American either. So anyway, so that takes us to kind of what does it mean to be a Latinx or Asian American actor in Hollywood, right? So we have here Lucy Liu, who's Chinese American Oscar Isaac. If you didn't know, he's actually Latinx, and we'll talk a little bit about him. And so these are, so in our country, Latinx folks are the largest non-white population, right? And Asian Americans Asians are actually the fastest growing minority group, and yet I don't think we're seeing them proportionally represented on television and film, right? In the city of Los Angeles, where Hollywood is, 49% are Hispanic, are Latinx, and then 11% are Asian. So if you put them together, they are the majority population in Los Angeles, yet in Hollywood, invisible, right? Okay, so what is this problem? So here's a quote from Lucy Liu, and I think it really embodies the kind of bind that these actors are in. She says, people see Julia Roberts or Sandra Bullock in a romantic comedy, but not me. You add race to it, and it became, well, she's too Asian, or she's too American. I kind of got pushed out of both categories. It's a very strange place to be. You're not Asian enough, and then you're not American enough, so it gets really frustrating. So this is tough, right? Like you basically have no category to be in terms of if people are casting by racial categories, right? And we're going to get into what does it mean to be American, what does it mean to be Asian in Hollywood, and I think also in society in terms of our perceptions of race. So there was a study, a psychology study of college students asking actually specifically about Lucy Liu and who's this? Kate Winslet, right? About who is seen as more American. And guess what the majority of people thought, who they thought was more American? Kate Winslet. So do you know the origins of Kate Winslet? English, right? She's not from here. She's English, she's British. Lucy Liu, born and raised in Queens, New York, right? So, so this is a problem, right? So college students your age think of Kate Winslet as more American. I mean, she was in the Titanic. We talk about Titanic being, again, right? It won Best Picture, got the most nominations, also record 14. So maybe that also impacts the way people think about, right, who Kate Winslet is. Okay, so this problem with not American enough. So what is the difference between Kate Winslet and Lucy Liu? Besides the fact that she's actually not American, but what is the biggest difference, you think? Go back. They're actually both wearing white. I tried to make them look as similar as possible in terms of clothing. Thoughts? Kind of the obvious, huh? Ethnicity, race, right? So I think the idea of American in Hollywood, as well as in our society, unfortunately, is that American is synonymous with whiteness, right? So anybody who is non-white is questioned in terms of their Americanness, citizenship. We're definitely in that era of citizenship and legality of immigration. Okay, so this is John Cho. He was in the rebooted Star Trek series. He's been working in Hollywood for a long time, so it's only now. And he was on this brief television series called, you're nodding your head, do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Flash Forward, and also he was, Selfie, yes, Selfie. So he was actually played a romantic lead. It was a My Fair Lady storyline. He played the Professor Higgins, which is kind of ironic, right? But like they didn't even let the series finish before they canceled. It was on ABC, and he had a black boss. It was actually very racially, and then another African American. Actually, the black boss was also British in origin. But anyway, just really interesting. So he says, what I'm locked out of is American history. There just aren't roles written for Asians in stories that revolve around American history. So yeah, have you guys seen any kind of historical films starring Asian Americans? Anybody? So does that mean that Asian Americans were not part of American history? I think we were, right? Starting actually the 1700s, Filipino sailors were landed in Louisiana. And so that's the founding father time, right? We had Filipinos, Japanese and Chinese American, they were immigrants to the United States around the 1800s. And so it's not like they haven't been a part of history. And we think about Hispanics, Latinos, Latinas. They've been in this country, well, guess what? Since before the United States, right? If you think about the whole western part of the United States, that was part of Mexico at one point. So and so that's part of the story of the kind of Western occupying of those lands by the United States. But not represented, at least in recently. We could talk about historical representations, actually how that justified colonialism, but in terms of recent, I can't even think of anything besides independent films and stuff, right? So this is an issue, right? When you're not part of American history and stories about American history, that does make you seem less American, right? It seems like everybody just came off the jet or off the boat or across the borders, when in fact, Asian Americans and Latinx have been here, since the founding of the country. So this is Rita Moreno. She's an Oscar winner. She won her Oscar, does anyone know for what? West Side Story. She played not Maria, but Maria's sister, Anita. Anyway, so she's an Oscar winner. She's actually now in this Netflix series called One Day at a Time. It's a reimagined of an older. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's a sitcom, but it's actually, I think I cried in the first episode. I cry a lot, though, when I see people of color on TV, because I'm like, oh my gosh. And she does a really good job. It's about a Cuban family. So she says, I played a lot of little Senorita, Lolita, Conchita, Lolita kind of Spitfire roles, everything but an American girl. I was the utilitarian ethnic. So everything but an American girl, right? So she's been around since, I think West Side Story might have been her first breakout role, and that's the 60s, and so, yeah, this is what she's gotten, and so not being able to be American, you end up playing all sorts of ethnic roles, right? And they're always kind of accented and stereotyped. Okay, so we're gonna watch this clip. This is from a small HBO documentary that I don't even think you can find anywhere, but HBO did these little documentaries for cheap for HBO, and they were like this small series on Asian Americans, and this one was called East of Main Street, and it was all these interviews with Asian actors, which was actually, I saw it at a film festival and managed to get a copy. So this was B.D. Wong. He is a Tony Award-winning actor, and you know, again, these actors who win these awards, they should be going on to get big, big roles, right? But I think I've only seen him on small, like he was on Law and Order SVU for the longest time, but he was just kind of the guy who would walk on and say, yeah, that criminal, he was like a forensic psychologist, he'd come on and say, oh yeah, that criminal, blah, 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 and then kind of leave. And you knew nothing about him, his family, nothing, right? So it was, I don't think you identified with him ever, right? So this is another, like when you get kind of these sidekick roles, or not even sidekick, he was less of a sidekick, he was just kind of a, what they call like expositional roles, where people would come on just to forward the plot along for the main characters, right? So the doctor.
It's like in Jurassic World.
Jurassic World. So he played that role in Jurassic World, right? Well, he was a little bit of kind of a villain, but still not like a huge villain, right? He was just kind of a little villain. But again, you didn't know much about him. You certainly didn't empathize with him. But so this is what he said about, you know, the whole American, what does it mean to be an American, and trying to challenge that. So a lot of the actors I interviewed actually did try to challenge these kind of very narrow restrictions. Not always successfully, but still, again, to create dialogue, just so people will think about it, right? Okay, so Oscar Isaac. He has played a lot of different roles. I don't know if you follow his career, but he was in Ex Machina, and he played Inside Llewyn Davis, who I don't think he was, I think he played a white character, right, essentially. And he was in Star Wars, but Star Wars, I guess everybody's kind of ethnically, I don't know, you don't have to even talk about ethnicity, really. Diego Luna, though, in the most recent one, he purposely, you know, said that he was just going to do his character with the Mexican accent, and so that was kind of subversive. I don't know if you guys saw that whole meme that went around where an audience person whose father saw it and was like, "What? He's speaking with an accent?" You guys should look it up, because it's so touching in terms of like seeing yourself represented in a big film. It's so important, right? Feeling like you matter. Yeah. So so this is if you guys didn't know, his last name is not Isaac. So here he says, starting out as an actor, you immediately worry about being pigeonholed or typecast. I don't want to just go up for the dead body, the gangster, the bandoleto, whatever. I don't want to be defined by someone else's idea of what an Oscar Hernandez should be playing. So I use my middle name, Isaac, as my last name. So this is actually common in Hollywood in terms of white ethnic actors. So I don't know if you guys watch older movies, but Doris Day, her real name was Doris Kappelhoff. It was a Polish name. Dean Martin, his original name was Dino Crocetti. So these kind of, you know, he was Italian, so these white ethnic names. So changing the name and making it more Anglo, I guess, I don't know, like I guess Western European, is common in Hollywood. And there are Latino actors who have done this and have been able to, quote unquote, I guess, pass, or at least not be immediately stereotyped. Because the thing is, when talent agents or casting agents are looking at headshots, which are what actors use to kind of, before they audition, so before a casting agent, casting director calls actors in, they look through headshots and then they choose who they want to call in for an audition, right? So if it says your last name and it is ethnic, I had one Latino actor who also changed his name. He said that like he didn't fit into the stereotype roles that they were call him in for, so he would never get them. So it was actually just his last name was enough to kind of hurt his chances, because he was actually pretty tall and big, and he felt like he wasn't, you know, again, I guess the Latino kind of stereotypes didn't call for his type of Latino, right? Or Latin, which is what they like to say in Hollywood. So here's Oscar Isaac changing his name in order to kind of do that. But a lot of actors of color can't do that. They can't just kind of change their names and be able to get more roles, right? Okay. Okay, so the other side of the coin is that you think, okay, well, if they're not American enough, they can get like ethnic roles. But in fact, they're also excluded a lot of times from ethnic roles. So what does that mean? It means that the ethnic roles are looking for stereotypes. And if you as an actor, especially an actor of color growing up in the United States and speaking standard English and maybe acting like anybody else would act, it's hard, right? Because then you actually have to put on a different persona in order to fit into this stereotype. So here's Eva Longoria, she talks about this problem. She says, I didn't speak Spanish growing up. I'm 9th generation. I mean, I'm as American as apple pie. I'm very proud of my heritage, but I remember moving to LA and auditioning and not being Latin enough for certain roles. Some white male casting director was dictating what it meant to be Latin. He decided I needed an accent. He decided I should have darker colored skin. Okay, so these are, again, obviously very, very constraining ideas, right? Skin color and speech patterns. I mean, I'm speaking with an accent. I don't think we think about that. I'm probably speaking with a Valley Girl accent or whatever, Southern California accent. So we're all accented, right? All of our English has a specific accent. But because, I think, largely because of Hollywood and the way that they characterize accents, we think of accents and English that isn't spoken, perfectly grammatically as somehow indicating someone is dumb or indicating like someone is, funny, right? When in fact, people trying to learn a language is not funny. It's pretty noble, actually, right? English is actually a really difficult language. The rules, it's not like, actually Spanish is a lot easier. I mean, not a lot easier, but it has like more consistent rules. English has all sorts of weird things anyway. But anyway, so skin color and accents are an issue in terms of not being ethnic enough if you don't fit into those stereotypes. Here's America Ferrera. She says, my very first audition ever, I was about 16, and the casting director for a commercial said, can you do it but sound more Latino? I had no idea what she was talking about. You mean you want me to speak in Spanish? She was like, no, do it in English, but just sound more Latino. I genuinely did not realize until later that she was asking me to speak English with a broken accent. Okay, so again, this is also this conflation of speaking with a broken accent with a racial category, right? Sound more Latino, and the Asian actors would get that. Can you do it more Asian? Which means like do it with an accent, right? So this is a problem, right? Because I don't think when they say, well, they don't even say in Hollywood, can you do it more white? But there's an understanding that people of a certain race, people within the white category can be a variety of things. But when they're auditioning Latino or Asian actors, they believe that they can only fit into a very narrow, right, perspective. So there was one actor, a Chinese-American actor, who was auditioning for a Japanese role. It was a Japanese mafia role, and they asked for him to do it in a Japanese accent. So he was like, okay, I'm going to think about like the Japanese actors I know, like Toshio Mifune, who's like this famous Japanese actor. When he speaks English, what does he sound like? So he did that accent. And she's like, no, that's not the Japanese accent. That's not a Japanese accent. Do it again. And so then he thought, what is she thinking? She's probably thinking of a stereotyped Asian accent. So he does this like kind of pseudo-Chinese like accent that that we've all heard on film and television. He did it, and she's like, that's the Japanese accent I was looking for, right? So the casting directors, there's no training for that job, and so people are relying on stereotypes. So she didn't know. What she knew of an Asian accent is just based on stereotypes. And you know what the origin of that accent is? That origin of that accent is actually white actors playing Asians back in the day. So white actors in what's called yellowface, they created these accents based on what they thought Asians sounded like. And those are the accents that have been passed down through the years in terms of what an Asian accent. So it's like Asian actors are now subject to those accents that white actors invented back in the day. So it's just crazy making, right? This is Hollywood. But then Hollywood kind of transmits all these images, and when you are not, so research shows that when you are not in contact with certain groups, like let's say I've never met an Asian person in my life, I'm going to watch film and television, I'm going to think, oh, that's how Asians are. Like even if consciously you know that's fiction, subconsciously you're thinking, okay, that's how these people are, right? And that's really, really dangerous. There's actually research that shows in Taiwan, they did an interview, a survey of what do you think about African Americans in Taiwan. So they had all sorts of stereotypes, right? Criminal, thugs, all these things. And then they asked them, where did you get these ideas? Hollywood. So Hollywood is not only impacting domestic ideas, it's also exporting these stereotypes internationally, right? Okay, so the complexities of race, right? So when you're not ethnic enough, part of it is because Hollywood cannot comprehend that someone who is Latino could have dark skin and have Afro-Latino background. So this is Christine Milian, do you guys know her? She was in, what is that cheerleading movie? Huh? Bring It On, yeah, Bring It On. So, and I think she played kind of a black character on that. So she says, my agent was saying, okay, we're having trouble. We sent her out for Latino roles, but they're looking for fair skin or Mexican. I ended up booking more African American roles. I still to this day have trouble booking a lot of Latino roles just because I'm a brown Latina. So complexities of race really doesn't fit in well with Hollywood's kind of like, okay, if you're this race, you only look like this and sound like this and behave like this, right? So I'm gonna show you a clip. Yeah, so thoughts about that? Have you guys thought about that before? Yeah.
I just noticed that a lot of those actors, I've seen them in various roles here and there, but I had no idea that they were Latino.
Yeah.
I always thought they were African American.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? Because that's the kind of roles that they have to play, because that's Hollywood cannot imagine. Hollywood is not able to accommodate that kind of role, right? They're not familiar with, and partly because we haven't talked about, but behind the scenes, it's even more homogenous in terms of white men, right? So.
Most of them are on TV shows that are like the side characters. I know one of the guy was talking, he's on Law and Order something, but I actually never really know. He just came in, as he said, so they play a very like minor role, and they don't have any stories to them. And they're always like mostly on TV shows, because movies is too much.
Yeah, well, the movie thing, I mean, there was the whole whitewashing controversy of Doctor Strange, who actually was a film made by Scott Derrickson, who was an alumni of Biola, actually, if you guys didn't know. Woo, we're so famous. But of course, Doctor Strange, he cast he made a Tibetan character. He changed the Tibetan male character to Celtic character, and it was played by Tilda Swinton, who is a white woman. So that was the controversy, right? And so, yeah, but a lot of the ideas behind the kind of changing the role or not casting an Asian in a lead is that, oh, well, it's a risk, right? On a show, it's just like whatever, guest star, but to sell a film, they can't do that, right? Because they're not famous enough. But part of the problem is that they're not writing those roles, and then when those roles exist, they cast somebody else. So like it's kind of a cyclical problem, right? Where you're not letting them have any chances. So how can they actually make it big? And it's not true for white actors, because have you guys seen the movie Thor? So one of the Hemsworth brothers, I always forget their first name. It's Chris, the one in Thor? Okay, so Chris Hemsworth, he was an unknown before he did that movie. He was from Australia, maybe he was known in Australia, but he was not known here. So they do take a risk, right, on casting unknowns. And certainly, if you think about the Marvel films and Star Wars, these are franchises, right? People go to see the franchise. And in fact, I think they sometimes try to cast people you don't know, because otherwise you're like, oh, Tom Cruise and that, I don't accept that, or versus someone that you don't know. So that whole excuse of like, oh, we need to cast a really famous actor to sell this movie, they only kind of bring that excuse out when people say, why didn't you cast a person of color, right? So anyway, so I have all the counter arguments for Hollywood, but Hollywood has a whole slew of financial reasons why they want to cast predominantly white men in roles, but none of them holds water. You guys saw the statistic earlier about how people of color actually go to see films at a higher rate, right, than white audiences. And TV, actually, African Americans watch more TV than other groups, and Asian Americans stream more media than other groups. So people of color are actually consuming more media. So the audience, and obviously, the demographics are shifting. By 2041, we're going to be majority people of color. So Hollywood is still, it's still behind, right, in terms of being able to kind of produce products that are reflective of their audiences. Okay, so let's go back to east of Main Street, 35. So I thought that, so what is the solution, right, to this problem of not ethnic enough and not American enough, right? What should Hollywood do instead? So he's someone he was in the Joy Luck Club. Did anyone ever see that? So he was in these small films. And again, these are actors who were really talented, but because there's just he is definitely a leading man kind of character. He actually did have his own television series it's called Native Son, I think, back in the 90s. But I've met him before, and he's really tall, really beautiful, but he just couldn't catch a break, right? And it is, I think, very frustrating for actors. There was an actor back in the 50s, James Shigeta. He was in Flower Drum Song, and he was in a few other films. And he was actually told by a Hollywood producer, if you were white, you'd be hell of a big star. But he wasn't. So, I mean, he's totally, let me see if I can find a photo of him. Definitely another leading man kind of guy. And so this is him. So he's just like born in the wrong era, although even now, like we just talked about Steven Yeun, still can't, you know, still, it's still not the right era, right? Like when is it gonna be the right era when an Asian guy can actually get a romantic lead? Or you know, I guess John Cho had that very, very brief, or get cut immediately. So yeah, so these are issues that, that actors of color face in Hollywood, but I would argue that the same kind of arguments can be kind of transposed to real life, right? We still, I mean, we're in a current situation where our president has targeted Latinx, Latino men as criminals and rapists, right? He literally has said that. And these are, guess what? These are stereotypes in Hollywood, right? These are kind of how Latino men are portrayed in Hollywood. And really our president is actually a product of Hollywood as well. If you guys know him from The Apprentice, right? So, these ideas are not kind of isolated just as entertainment, right? So like I said, that when we don't have contact with certain groups, we draw those ideas from Hollywood. And there's also research that shows that when you are a person of color, the more television you watch, for every hour, so there was actually a study of black boys and girls and white boys and girls. And so for every additional hour of television that white girls, black boys and girls watched, their self-esteem would go down. So, and the same did not happen. Actually, white boys, their self-esteem actually went up. So this shows that, you know, with television, even children's programming, the kind of heroes, who are the heroes? You think about who are the heroes in action film, right? You guys know James Bond? There was a huge controversy when people were thinking, oh, Idris Elba could play James Bond. And like people came out, like Roger Moore, who was a former James Bond, he's like, oh no, he's not English enough, right? This is so the whole American enough, I guess you could substitute English enough, right? And then actually even the guy who penned some of the novels said that he was.
He didn't agree. He's like English enough. He didn't put the part that he wrote for.
Yeah, or he was too street.
Yeah.
So those are coded language, right? Too street, meaning, I don't know, this kind of synonymous. So we didn't talk about African Americans, but in my book, this is just one chapter that focuses on Latinos and Asian Americans, but African Americans, whole another set of stereotypes as well. So race, so I think African Americans, that's Idris Elba would be Black British, but the idea of, so it's interesting about Americanness and race and African Americans. We could talk about that too, because there's some parts where they're included, but there's other parts where they're excluded. So yeah, so this is based on my book, Real Inequality. I said I started this in 2000, and this is my Twitter handle for my book. And I actually tweet a lot on race in Hollywood specifically. So if you guys want to follow me, there's also a Facebook group for my book. But you know, I want to kind of open it up for a discussion of what you guys think in terms of these categories, and maybe even personal stories of when you've been told, like when I've been told, like, oh, you speak English really well, like that's kind of a way of saying you're not American enough and you're not ethnic enough, right? Because somehow you're not fitting my idea of what someone who looks like you should sound like. Yeah.
What's your thought in Aloha movie with Emma Stone and the other white guy, and then Matt Damon, the fact that Asians can't keep getting big, they keep making roles for them, but still casting white people to play those roles.
Yeah. So there's the whitewashing where a white actor plays a role that is Asian or another. So it's not just Asians. It's, you know, you guys seen Argo. So the main character played by Ben Affleck is actually Latino. Although when he was challenged, so I write about it in my book, when he was challenged, why didn't you cast a Latino, you know, for the main character? He's like, well, he doesn't seem Latino to me. Like, he sounds like, he doesn't speak with an accent. Like, he literally said that. So meaning that all Latinos must speak with accents, otherwise they're not Latino. So he said that, and guess what? That movie won Best Picture that year. So so that's a major problem. So whitewashing in terms of, so the idea is that white actors can play any role under the sun, right? That they can occupy anything. And that's actually what an actor should be able to do, right? Acting, you're pretending to be somebody else. You should be able to play anything. But I think that, again, the stereotypes that our society has, that Hollywood perpetuates, is that people of color have to occupy a very, like my presentation presented, very narrow set of characteristics. They cannot deviate from those characteristics, otherwise maybe they're a threat, maybe they are assimilating and that's a problem. I don't know what it is subconsciously, but it's just that those roles are not being made and they're not allowed to kind of go outside of those as much, right? I mean, maybe in theater, you see that if you guys go to the theater, maybe Shakespeare will cast, cross-racially or something, but it's always like fraught with controversy. It isn't without controversy, right? And so like Hollywood, so they talk about colorblind casting where you should, cast, anybody should be able to play anything, right? But then that ends up actually favoring white actors overall because again, there's like, I could go into, but like even talent, there's so many barriers to success. Like even talent agents will not take on actors of color because I had one actor tell me that he tried to get an agent and he's like, and it was an African-American actor. He said the talent agent told him, we already have a black guy, we can't take you. And he's like, well, how many white guys do you have? Like your whole roster, right? And he's like, sorry, we already have a black guy, so can't have, we can't take on another. So when you don't get a talent agent, you can't, your access to roles are limited, right? So when people say there aren't enough talented, or not enough actors of color to get for those roles, then it's actually the fact that there are so many barriers for them to get in, right? I talked to another talent agent who told me that there's a perception there are not enough Asian actors to go around. And I asked her, I was like, oh, have you gone to East West Players? Because East West Players it's the oldest ethnic theater in the United States, and it's in Little Tokyo, and it's basically Asian American actors go and they perform. They get to actually perform and do plays and actually do substantial roles that they wouldn't otherwise get in Hollywood. And she said she never heard of it. She'd never heard of East West Players. So this is someone in LA, working in LA. She had never heard of East West Players, right? So they're not looking very hard, right? They just assume, oh, well, they're not in the audition rooms or they don't have agents representing them, then they probably don't exist, right? But there's barriers that prevent them from doing so. So in terms of Matt Damon, though, so you think about The Last Samurai. Tom Cruise was The Last Samurai because you could just come in and learn, samurai moves that are supposed to be learned over hundreds of years or whatever, your lifetime. So he's The Last Samurai. So we also have Dances with Wolves. I don't know if you guys remember that film. That was also like, oh, Kevin Costner, saves Native Americans from themselves. So it's a very common trope in Hollywood, right? Again, it's like we have this. So then people of color become kind of, they're like props or they're scenery, right? You think about Katy Perry. You guys saw her performance a few years back where she dressed up as a geisha. So it's like Orientalism or like these racial, it's like the whole Halloween costume, right? If you can put on an entire race as a Halloween costume, then it literally is that the culture or the race is just something to kind of enhance your own experience rather than respecting it as, as an actual like group. But yes, it's again, the people in power in Hollywood want to create narratives that that promote their own groups. And it could be, it's probably subconscious, so implicit bias is big in Hollywood. It's not like, Hollywood doesn't, they see themselves as completely progressive, right? If you were to ask them, and I did, I asked a top talent agent he's like the talent agent to Ben Stiller and other A-list actors. Like when I asked him at a conference, I said, so what do you think about the problem with racism and sexism in Hollywood? And he's like, oh my gosh, it's so bad, it's terrible. And he's like, but I don't care about diversity, I care about brilliance. That's what he said, right? So even though they want to come off as really progressive, when they're actually casting, they're not intentional about it at all. And they've subscribed to these myths. So what I argue in that chapter and with that quote is that colorblind racism is something that's very rampant. The whole blaming, like we can't find enough, they're not ready, not thinking about, okay, there's structural and implicit biases that are keeping people from coming in. And the whole idea of brilliance, I break down, what is brilliance? How do you define brilliance, right? So when you've only seen, like again, Oscar so white, when you've only seen the award system award certain groups, you naturally start to think that that group is synonymous with brilliance, rather than thinking about, oh, well, maybe my idea of brilliance might be skewed because the entire kind of population of actors that have been able to get nominated is skewed, right? So, okay, long answer for, it's very complicated, but when you think about it, it makes sense.
So, I've been, like, last year there were no, like, colored actors nominated for the Oscars, and then this year there are, and then there's been, like, a ton of movies, like Fences, Moonlight, Get Out, which is like some dumb horror movie, and like all these movies with like colored people as leads.
Actors of color,
Yeah.
or people of color is usually how you say it.
Yeah.
Don't go out and say colored people. That's just gonna get you in trouble. So just okay.
So I want to be a IATSE, second AC, and a gaffer, and a DP, and then later go into foreign distribution.
Oh, cool.
So like, how systematically can we change it? Because I feel like it's awesome that we're getting like exposure finally, but these are still like band-aid solutions to like the core problems of the industry. Like obviously we need to change things in like the Oscar voting, the Academy system, and like all these things. But how systematically can we like needs to happen, and like what do you think ideally like would change?
Well, what you just said, you know, being, can you explain to people what a gaffer is for people who don't know?
Wedding technician.
Okay,
Which
so.
is predominantly male.
Yeah. So there's also what's called below the line people. So above the line are the people, the kind of people that you think of in terms of Hollywood, like directors, producers. But there's also people who are called below the line. So the people. So I talked about working actors, but these are the people that kind of make the film happen in terms of getting lighting, putting together technical stuff, and that is so. These are unions, right? A lot of them are all of Hollywood. The more mainstream jobs are unionized. And traditionally, so this is part of the reason why these jobs are so homogenous, is that traditionally unions in Hollywood, you can only get into the union if you're related to someone inside the union, right? So then if the union is only white, then literally it will only admit white folks. So that's changed since then, but that even like producers guild, directors guild, a lot of these you need recommendations. Like you can't just kind of get in, right? I think Screen Actors Guild, though, I think if you play a certain role and you have enough lines, you get in. But other like, and maybe Mike, you could talk about that. We have a professor from our film department here about like how these guilds work, and so they are exclusionary, right? But I know the Academy used to be that you have to get nominated, and I think since Oscar So White, Cheryl Boone Isaac, she's African American, she's the head of the Academy, she actually opened it up. And Idris Elba, he was just inducted this past year. I was like, Idris Elba's not in the Academy? What is going on, So there were a lot of people that, were invited in and just, and so there was an intentional kind of recruitment in order to change the demographics. And I think that, so studies of diversity, just in general, in like managerial, like in companies, so the study it's a huge study coming out of Berkeley, and it shows that that what you need in order to diversify industries, you need staff, full-time staff devoted to it, and you do need some sort of quota system, right? You actually need intentional openings, because if you just rely on the good graces of people who are already there, because of their implicit biases, they are not going to hire. So in creative industries, also people rely on social networks. Right? They usually invite, it's a word of mouth thing, right? And the Pew Research study showed that whites have 91% whites in their social circles. So they only know, so their social circles are very, very homogenous. So if they're relying on social circles, it's just people of color are not going to be able to get in, right? So the only way to actually diversify any industry is to have full-time staff devoted to diversifying, not just kind of doing something else and doing this on the side, but actually staff that's like for diversity hiring. And then having openings, creating openings. And the mentoring helps a little bit with retention, but actually it's having the full-time staff and creating openings is what's going to change. But convincing Hollywood of that is, that's the hard part, right? They're not regulated. Right, and I argue in my book that actually broadcast television can be regulated. Our government doesn't choose to, but it can be, because broadcast television, so ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, the ones that are like publicly available, that you don't have to pay a subscription to get, they actually are using public airwaves, right? So PBS as well. So PBS, should be really serving the people, but we got. I love these shows, but Downton Abbey and Sherlock, they're exporting or importing these shows that are, from England, and they're not creating enough shows that are actually reflective of the United States demographic. But actually, the FCC, so the Federal Commission on Communications, can actually say, like, you need to create programming and you need to hire, but they don't, right? So in my book, I argue that they should. But of course, in our current government deregulation, like, there's talk of getting rid of the FCC, just as there's talk of getting rid of the EPA and all sorts of these regulation kind of governing bodies. So anyway, so I'm like, I'm arguing for this, but it's not it's not going to happen right now, not for the next 4 years. No one in the government's going to be sympathetic to the government intervening in Hollywood. But it's something that can be done, because by law, they are supposed to serve the people. Yeah. Other questions? Yes.
It's kind of a similar question.
Yeah.
I'm screenwriting emphasis here.
Okay,
and
great.
So, like, for me, I get frustrated when I hear these things, because I'm like, oh, I can kind of change it by writing diverse characters and stuff. But then when I think about when I think about my favorite TV shows with people of color in them, like Atlanta or Insecure, I think about how those people who kind of started those shows, like Issa Rae and Donald Glover, they already had influence in entertainment. Like, Donald Glover was a rapper, and Issa Rae had her YouTube series, and it was kind of like a one in a million kind of chance where it was they already had a certain amount of influence, and so because of that, they got these opportunities. So it's just frustrating, and I wonder what your thoughts are on that, as coming from someone who's a writer, how if I write scripts with diverse characters, will it even matter? Will the people in power want to, is that something that I can even market towards people, or is it
Yeah. Well, I think that the solution isn't to start writing non-diverse characters, right? And I would actually argue that Issa Rae is a different kind of, she actually, like you said, it was through her YouTube series, right? And there's all this talk in Hollywood, we just make your own stuff and post it to YouTube and somebody will notice. I mean, I think the internet is now oversaturated with content, but the fact that someone like Issa Rae could come in from outside of the system and be recognized and be kind of bought into the system, and she's doing amazing work, and she's definitely changing the kind of millennial of color narrative in ways that we've not ever seen before, and it's because she's coming from her own personal kind of space, right? Where when you're making YouTube, you're not subject to anybody's, restrictions and expectations. So I think that Issa Rae is an example that it's possible. But then when we look at Asian Americans and Latinos, there's YouTubers actually that have been around for a while and they haven't been picked up, right? So it isn't across the board, and it's not like black YouTubers are all getting picked up either. So she is perhaps an exception, but it's possible, I think. And I think that I just went to a panel on sorry, you're gonna see. Anyway, these are selfies that people took with my book. I just went to a panel. It was called Switched at Birth. So I was joining them. And actually, if you guys have access to basic cable, I would encourage you to watch Switched at Birth this coming Tuesday and the Tuesday after that, because they're actually having these episodes on campus racism, and they're the best. They're the best representations of campus racism, the whole University of Missouri. It actually was based on real events. It was, I'm not kidding you, it was some of the best representations I've seen, and it's all centered on black students. And so the showrunner, though, is a white woman, right? And she decided to do this because she saw she was inspired by the student protests, and she decided she's gonna create, because I guess the Switched at Birth characters. So I don't know if do you guys know that that series. So there's actually 3 deaf characters on that series. So it's a really kind of very interesting series that I didn't know anything about until I was on the panel and watched the series. So it already has like these kind of outside of the box, so diversity isn't just about race and gender, but it's also about disability as well. So anyway, so when she saw this, she decided that she would hire a director of color, and she already had a writer's room she had a pretty diverse writer's room, so it wasn't like she had to hire new writers, but she allowed them to infuse their writing with their own experiences, and then she hired actors and the actors, and I mean, she hired the right people and allowed them to tell the story in a great way, and she's a white female showrunner, and just talking to her, I got to talk to her. And she actually emailed me. She's like, anything you need, let me know. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is like a major showrunner who just met me. But it's because because I told her that I was going to show that series to our faculty, because I was like, our faculty need to understand why students of color are mad and why they would be mad enough to want to destroy property or want to have protest, right? So, and she was so inspired, and I could tell that she had an activist mind. Like, she really wanted to make a difference with her work. She actually said that a few seasons ago, for those of you guys who've watched, I guess they had an episode where it was all done in American Sign Language, like the entire episode. You guys know? So how did you, I didn't see the episode, how was it? What did you guys think when you saw it?
It was a while since I watched it, but I remember, because I know sign language too, so it was really interesting, how the other characters who didn't know, they spoke English instead of the signing,
Mm-hmm.
but it was really cool that they picked up on the sign language from the actual deaf actors.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But it was really interesting.
Yeah, it was turning our dominant perspective, on its head, right? Where you have the people who are in the margins become the main characters. And this particular, this Tuesday and the next Tuesday, they turn it around and have it about the African American characters. Although I was sitting there and I was thinking, well, why don't we make it about those characters? Why is it like the special episode, right, about the marginalized? But Switched at Birth, one of the main characters is deaf. So, and there's a Latina who is the other main character. So it's actually, I was really surprised. Actually, I was thinking, wow, this is a really, this is because it's on the. It used to be called ABC Family. Now it's called Freeform, but it's geared towards people your age. So you should check it out. But anyway, but yeah. So I think that there's more interest now. It's not like it's going to be any easier, though, but I think that, I don't want to sound so Hollywood, you got to write what you know, but because actually white writers typically use that to exclude people of color. But I think that, but I also argue in the book that you do need different voices and diverse voices, because otherwise because what I'm noticing in Hollywood is that the writers' rooms, especially for television, because television is ongoing, right? So these writers continue to write new series, versus film, it's just kind of the screenwriter writes the screenplay and that's it. But the television writers, I think what's cool about them is that they're constantly drawing from the personal experience. So actually when I was on the panel, the director who actually was hired for this campus racism episode, but he didn't know that was the episode he was going to direct. And she didn't know this about him because she didn't tell him what it was about. But then it turned out that he actually was a football player at that. And so part of the episode is that the athletes, which happened at University of Missouri, where they sat out and boycott, right, in order to get the Black Student Union to get a meeting with the chancellor and stuff. So, and he said that he did that when he was in college. So it was just, and he was actually the head of the Black Student Union, and they didn't even know this, right? She just hired him because he was talented, which is the best way to go, right? Rather than, okay, have you experienced racism? So I want you to direct this. But it was more like, what's your experience? Oh yeah, it's cool. We really click. So let's get together and work together. And also. So Ava DuVernay, who is, and I've met her as well, she directed Selma. She also directed The 13th, which is, if you guys haven't seen that on Netflix, it's one of the best documentaries that I've ever seen. And it's nominated for Oscar this year. Anyway, so she, for Queen Sugar, she decided to hire only women. So this is her first season of a new series. She hired all female directors for her. I mean, that's bold, right? But that's intentionality. We need intentionality. If you're not intentional, it's not going to happen. And then I was on a panel. I went to a conference where she's a white female showrunner of Jessica Jones, which is a series on Netflix. So for this season, she is also doing all female directors because female directors are they're the least represented. I just saw a statistic: 7 out of 1,000 directing jobs go to women of color. So only 7 out of 1,000. So yeah, so I think maybe they're all from like Queen Sugar, you know, so, or Jessica Jones now, because people are just not hiring, you know, outside of the kind of dominant norm. So yeah, Mike.
So one of the things, I think it's going to be a lot tougher. I think that we're talking about different layers. And one of the layers, and probably the most extreme example of a layer, which was actually part of my dissertation, is I did a study of, my focus was on Latino filmmakers. And so as my study group, I did 5 Latino film students from USC and 5 Latino film students from Biola. The 5 Latino film students from USC felt really empowered. The 5 Latino film students from Biola felt that they had a burden, an extra layer that they had to cross through because they were afraid of being identified as Christian. They were Latinos, and now to say, it's sort of like a secret society, like, you know, you meet somebody on the lot and there's like a secret, almost like a secret handshake, but you know, where, oh, I didn't know you were talking in low tones. So I think for people of color, like myself, who worked in the industry for a long time, and you kind of have this secret society where you're networking with people of faith. And also I've noticed at the Biola Media Conferences, it's a little dangerous for some of our guests to go to that event and speak, because sometimes, probably more often than not, they will say, everybody turn off your cell phones, turn those cameras off. I don't want anything to go out online about what I'm going to say. So,
So you think being Christian is also a
Yes.
potential pitfall of being a
Right.
filmmaker?
yeah. So I just wanted to point that out because that's probably closer to home to this group in terms
Yeah.
of how what we believe in, and how are you going to survive in an industry that is already putting you in a box and a label, and then on top of it, where do you fit in with your faith?
Yeah. So I have a similar experience to that because I'm a sociologist, and sociologists are anti-Christian by default, right? Because I don't know if you know, the whole forefathers of sociology, Marx, Weber, Durkheim, like Marx said that religion is the opiate of the masses. So our very founding of sociology was actually they were obsessed with religion, but it was all about breaking down religion, right? So in grad school, I definitely faced that. But I've always been able to, I actually welcome challenges and being able to dialogue about my faith. I love being around non-Christians because I feel like I can dialogue with them very well because I never try to judge them, right? So I go into kind of sociological settings, and my idea is that my whole kind of purpose is that I'm going to show them that Christians are not what they think that they are, right? I'm going to be that Christian that they're going to be like, oh my gosh, if Nancy's a Christian, Christians are okay, right? So and what I do is I engage them. I have relationships with them. In fact, when I went to UCLA and I was a Christian, you know, in a secular campus, I was in my church. I was always the one that had non-Christian friends that I could bring. A lot of them were like already in the bubble and they stopped making friends with non-Christians, but I love non-Christians. And so when I had my book launch party, I had non-Christians come, right? My friends who are, you know, professors around Southern California, and they came, and one of them, I asked her to speak. It's so interesting. She actually she actually was just so, she says she felt like there was such good energy here. That's what she used. And I thought, when she said that, I was like, oh my gosh, she's feeling the Spirit, right? Because I mean, I guess maybe I just take the Spirit for granted, but when she pointed it out, I love seeing God through their eyes, you know, and I don't know, I guess I've never had any issues. When people ask me about my faith, I say, well, I'm kind of more like the Martin Luther King, MLK kind of Christian. And when I say that, like they're all down with that, right? Because who's going to say anything bad about Martin Luther King in sociology or Hollywood, right? And it's true. I think I feel more kinship with kind of the social justice aspect of Christianity. So when I say that, that's my way of kind of saying, yeah, I'm an MLK Christian. I'm not really like, I don't know if you would call me the kind of, evangelical, the typical evangelical Christian. I just say I'm an MLK. So, so you guys are totally free to use that. I'm an MLK Christian, right? Because I feel like I want to dialogue, and I feel like actually when I'm in those settings, I don't feel judged actually as a Christian, and I think it's what you're projecting and what you're willing to kind of engage with them. Like if you're not judging them, most likely they're not judging you, right? Sorry, I didn't mean to preach about engagement, but that is definitely, thank you. But that's my experience being also very, very hostile to Christianity. I was 8 years in grad school, and I actually led a seekers group in grad school. And actually, the only time I ever brought someone to Christ was in grad school. So, and that was just me living my faith. I never once preached. It was just always an invitation. And there was some like suffering and trials we had, and my friend came to Christ because she saw that we lived with faith, and I prayed for her. And it was the first time I felt like God telling me, okay, like literally talking to me about my friend, and that was just so special. It was such an so I think it's possible. Actually, it is where God works, right? And we are called to go into the world, and I think that it's exciting to go in. So if for those of you guys who are interested in going to Hollywood, I think people in Hollywood are hurting. So many of them are hurting. That's my experience. It's a high-risk industry, so it's constantly you're being evaluated, even if you're working behind the scenes. It's all performance, right? You're constantly performing. And you can never be yourself. And I think that to have authentic connections with people, because I think that's what Christians we can bring. We can bring authentic connections, right? If you go out into the world, a lot of times people are not able to go there, very much, because you have to be vulnerable, right? But because we have our assurances, our identities in Christ, we can be vulnerable, right? If we're hurt, we know that it's ultimately like that's not the end of the world, right? But for other people, they don't have that, right? So if you're vulnerable and you're able to make authentic connections, you can make some really, really deep relationships with non-Christians, and I think they really appreciate that. That's been my experience in Hollywood and in just the secular world. Again, sorry, preaching. Anyhow, other ideas and questions about what about like just in terms of our own identities? Have other people have experienced, being kind of stuck between extremes in terms of expectations, or not fitting into expectations, even in terms of being a person of faith? That could be something, right? Yes. Oh, you first.
I think like this idea of like, I don't know if you've like studied this as well, but like queer baiting in Hollywood's like idea of like what it means to be a part of the LGBTQ plus community, and how like shows will allude, or or movies will allude to a character being queer but never come out and say it. So you get, you can accommodate the people who, are more conservative and don't necessarily want to be watching a show that...
Could you give me an example of queer baiting?
How to Get Away with Murder, Biola Davis.
Oh, okay.
That's a cartoon.
Original Cora.
Yeah.
Okay. I haven't watched How to Get Away with Murder. Now you guys are like, spoiler alert. Okay, so interesting. Okay.
But just this idea of like, and then even in shows and movies that come out with, queer characters, and this idea of like, if you are gay, you are this, and this is the stereotype, and you're not a person of faith. You are, this sex crazy, lustful human being that has no morals.
I've seen that on How to Get Away with Murder. Definitely a lot of, extreme representations.
I don't know, just in like my personal experience, like as someone who does identify as queer, it's frustrating to not have representation in that way. That Hollywood, continues to perpetuate this idea that because of my sexual orientation, I'm not allowed to be a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not allowed to have a family. I'm not allowed to,
You need to
be
write that
enough.
story. You need to write that story. I think it's so compelling, right? I think that people outside of the Christian church would be interested in too, that tension, because those are things that you would think are oppositional, but in fact, this is people's lived lives. But yeah, Hollywood, complex, like one of the actresses, the complexities is not something that Hollywood, they can't even deal with a Black Latina, to deal with a Christian, queer person, that would be like, people would implode, right? And they also would think that maybe people would also think that like maybe there's not an audience for that, right? That's always, like I had a person, there was that Catholic family that had a queer son.
The real O'Neills.
Yeah, so that got canceled, right? Or is it still on? It's still on? Okay, but there was talk of, middle America can't handle it, right? Because it's the whole Catholic and queer, so it's a little bit like that. I don't know, have you guys seen it? Is it any good? Is it any good? Does it actually get at some of that tension or no?
A little bit.
Mm-hmm.
He does meet his boyfriend in the church choir.
Uh-oh. That's also bringing us some other stereotypes, right? But, well, maybe not. Maybe if it's done well, Because sometimes you can play on a stereotype, but actually, like, defeat it in the representation. That's effective.
It's like, I love and hate it at the same time.
It's kind of like fresh off the boat, right? Some of it is stereotype, but they're the leads. When you're the lead of the show, then there's more hope, right? Because again, in television, people are ongoing, and a lot of times the writers will write according to the actors as well, so then they can actually develop characters that are more human. They humanize them because they're actually basing it on the actors as they get to know them. So that's why television actually, television now is kind of like where diversity is happening, right? Because film, we still have all this whitewashing and stuff that's happening, but television, like you have, like I said, One Day at a Time and Master of None, you have these shows that are challenging stereotypes in a much more complex way and over a time period, especially if you have like 6 seasons. So like Switched at Birth, this is the 6th season, and they're able to kind of play around because they have a core audience, right? So if you have an established audience, you're willing to kind of take more of a risk in doing like more, whatever, cutting edge or, things that maybe you wouldn't do in the first season, right? Maybe they wouldn't have done campus racism and protests in the first season, but in the 6th season, they can do that, right? Other questions and thoughts? Yes,
My
please.
question is about the whole casting thing, and especially as it pertains to historical figures. So would you agree that it's always necessary to be accurate in portraying historical figures as accurate representations of as far as skin color, ethnicity? Do you think that there are any situations whatsoever where
Hamilton, right? We have Hamilton, right? Biggest Tony Award-winning nominated musical ever, and so powerful, right? So skin color, race, totally different. You guys know about Hamilton, the Revolution, yes. And so I think, no, I don't think that it necessarily has to be. I think that it's just, Hollywood, though, is unwilling to kind of go there. But the problem is there is hypocrisy in the kind of, like think about Lincoln, right? The movie Lincoln with Daniel Day-Lewis. Like I know that they took liberties in the storytelling, because anytime you tell a story, you're going to leave some things out and you're going to keep some things in, right? So the race, yes, all that is there, but then when Ava DuVernay told the story of Martin Luther King and Selma, people critiqued her for not being historically accurate. And some people say that critique, that narrative that came out, cost her the Oscar, because they were saying that she misrepresented Lyndon B. Johnson. Like she made him look like a villain when he wasn't as. It was, of course, it's going to be about that. But they didn't critique anything about Lincoln when they made him a hero, and he's not, a total hero in historical times. He wanted to send, the African slaves back to Africa. That was kind of his solution. He wasn't like this amazing civil rights leader by any means, but they kind of, they portrayed him more positively. So the whole kind of historical accuracy argument in Hollywood is often used to critique directors of color that I found, at least in the case of Ava DuVernay. So. Yeah, so I think historical accuracy, it's a convenient argument when it kind of buttresses the dominant, what's come before, what's been acceptable before, but when there are challenges to that. Because Ava DuVernay would have been the first Black female to be nominated for Best Director ever, but she didn't. She didn't get nominated. I mean, Selma was nominated, but she didn't get that nomination, partly because of those critiques of historical accuracy, which I just thought, oh, it's so convenient that that comes out when, when that movie with the British, actually he was gay, the guy who did the codes, Imitation Game, right? So that book wasn't even historically accurate. So, but there was no problem with that movie, no critique of that movie, right? So historical accuracy, I think it's just it's an interesting kind of topic. Yeah.
I mean, so with like Hidden Figures, I kind of saw that as like the nomination for Best Picture. I saw it as kind of like a scapegoat, especially because they wanted to, it was kind of like a push to trying to alleviate the pain that they caused last year, which they did. And they are doing better with this year, but Hidden Figures, there was a scene where Kevin Costner, where he breaks down the sign.
Yes.
That wasn't historically accurate, and the director said it was put in there to alleviate white guilt.
Yep. Did you guys know about that? Have you guys seen Hidden Figures?
Yeah, I found that as an issue, and I
Yeah.
feel like there was like The Birth of a Nation. I thought that was a way more powerful film, and it caused a lot of white guilt, and I thought that was a good thing. But I thought Hidden Figures was kind of scapegoat because of that, its intention to alleviate white guilt too, like kind of like accommodate for some audience, for the white audience.
Yeah. So that is a perfect answer to the historical accuracy, right? They'll create some fictional story about Kevin Costner being this white savior when it didn't happen in real life, in order to make the film more palatable, right? So again, but then the audiences, right? I mean, the audience was really wide. I mean, Hidden Figures, the first 2 weekends that it came out, actually beat out Rogue One, and this was big news, right? So no one's asked me about what can we do about this, but what can you do is actually support films like Hidden Figures or whatever film that you think needs more representation. Go to opening weekend. Because that newspaper article came out, and that was like big news, so that people would be like, oh, Hidden Figures makes money, let's cast more Black women, let's make more movies about women of color. And I was part of that. I went second opening week, and it was like a Girl Scout event. So the Girl Scouts actually organized this entire screening of Hidden Figures, and Hidden Figures was and most of the Girl Scouts were white. It was kind of expensive actually, the Hidden Figures screening, but I was but all the girls felt like they could see themselves in these women, in science, right? So it's the whole idea that only certain audiences only want to see themselves. I think that's true for people who haven't seen themselves, but I think the idea that white audiences won't go see movies that are featuring people of color, I mean, that's a lie, right? That's a lie that Hollywood perpetuates, and I think as Christians, we need to be very vigilant about defeating that lie, right? If we believe that we're all made in God's image, to really fight against that, and also to support underrepresented projects and films. And television, live tweeting is another thing that you guys can do. Live tweeting during a show that you support, that helps advertisers see, because they want live tweeters, because that means you're watching the advertisements live, so that they can sell more products. So if you're live tweeting a show, because that's what saved Scandal, the show Scandal, because the cast started live tweeting, and then all these people started live tweeting with them, and Scandal was able to remain on the air because of the live tweeting. So, yeah. So live tweeting is another thing. Okay. Yeah.
Are you familiar with Orange is the New Black?
Mm-hmm. I mean, not super familiar, but I know the show.
Yeah, a lot of people like that show. I love the show, but there's a lot of representation for Black people and Latinx people, but some people
and a few Asians.
Yeah.
Very, very few.
Some people critique it because they tell stories of Black lives, Latinx lives, but all of the writers are white, and people think that's a form of white-splaining.
Also, there was a part when one of the show, and the girl was like, "Oh, there's reverse racism," and the Black characters are very submissive to when a white woman, there's an episode where we're missing a lot of racism in the Black woman, so they were like, "Oh, of course," and then they went back to look at the writers, and it was all white women just writing Black characters. So it was really interesting.
Yeah, well, this is when you need a diverse writing room, right? Because I think that does. I mean, I don't think that white so that we can't have it both ways, right? We want white writers to be able to write people of color. So we can't say that they can't, but we do want there to be enough diversity in the room to like call them on it if they're like writing stuff that's actually racist, right? But it doesn't mean that people of color are not writing things that are racist, right? I think it's a state of mind, because I actually when I wrote my book, I was like, oh, the solution is to just get more people of color behind the scenes and in front of the scenes. But one of my reviewers, so when you publish an academic book, it goes through all these reviews by other professors, and she said that just because you have more people of color does not mean that things are gonna, like, all of a sudden, like, the storyline are gonna get better. You actually have to have people who are intentional about, you know, not writing stereotypes and not creating stereotype stories. So, so the assumption that the likelihood when it's not a diverse room that they're not going to care as much, maybe, but at the same time we want to hold white writers accountable that they shouldn't only write white, like, because you know the whole idea that you should only write what you know, but then that's the whole problem why we don't have enough characters of color. But they can do research, right, and they can consult. One of the things I actually suggest is consulting with the actors that are, you know, that you are working with. It's hard when the actors are only like one line, you know, like no one's going to consult the one-liner person. But if it's a regular, like the whole cast is regular, right? And Orange is the New Black, there should be some consultation. And also, yeah, if I didn't realize that the whole room was not diverse, because typically shows that have diverse casts have more diverse writers' rooms. Like Empire is pretty diverse, and even Fresh Off the Boat is diverse. So yeah, I'm surprised that Netflix hasn't done that, because you know Netflix also has Master of None, you know, and One Day at a Time. So yeah, it's not like it's not possible, but it's probably a lot of times it's the showrunners' choices too, right? The showrunners they can choose. Like I know Shonda Rhimes also has a very diverse writers' room. Like people, again, intentionality. People have to be very intentional about it.
Biola University prepares Christians to think biblically about everything, from science to business to education and the arts. Learn more at biola.edu.